Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and it's week 13. Thanksgiving week is here, and I'm going to do things a bit differently given the schedule. I'm not going to make any content on Thursday itself, so I'm going to kind of expedite my rankings. I've recorded every single position already. I will post running backs, wide receivers, and then the QB, tight end, and defense combo by like noon on Wednesday. Then I'm also going to post a start-sit video for the Thanksgiving and Friday games, those 4 matchups on Thursday and Friday. And then on Friday, when I get back to the channel, I will kind of break down a bit more nuanced stats and kind of pin down some of the final rankings. We'll go a little bit more in-depth on some of those nuances. So I am giving you rankings today, but I'm going to be honest with you, I will make a few tweaks. They're not totally complete, but overall, in terms of tiers, I do think they will stay put in that regard. So based on the information of Tuesday, I am ranking my top 55 running backs, and we will begin. But we're going to do a little differently. I'm going to break down the matchups first, tell you where the upgrades are, where the downgrades are, and then kind of expedite my logic for where I'm starting and benching certain players. So we're going to begin, and you'll see receiver and the other positions on the channel right after, very soon. But here we go. At running back, here are the matchups for the position in week 13. This chart represents all 32 teams, how they've been versus the running back position over their last 5 games. In order from most points allowed to fewest, the orange line represents the average of the NFL of 20.4 points to the position. So if you get over 20 points, it's good. I think once you hit over 23 points, you're talking, and it does pique my interest in terms of an actual upgrade overall at the position. But more importantly, I think the downgrades below like 16 points, those are the ones I'm more concerned about. Obviously, those 2 that are elite, 29 plus points, you want those for sure. So let's show you which teams these are. At the top, we have the Giants and the Jaguars. Terrible against the run this season. We saw all of the Tampa Bay running backs score a touchdown last week. So that's pretty emblematic of what to expect. And the Giants do face off against Dallas on Thursday. So Rico Dowdle going to get a big upgrade this week. He's more interesting. And number 2 matchup would be the Jags, who get the Texans this week. Joe Mixon should get back to elite football. So those 2 players get a big upgrade. Otherwise, the next group that I think is worth mentioning would be Rhamondre Stevenson, who gets the Colts at number 3, followed by Chuba Hubbard, who gets the Buccaneers at number 4, followed by James Cook against the Niners, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery against the Bears, Chase Brown against the Steelers, and Bucky Irving, Rachaad White against the Panthers. The last one I think is worth a solid upgrade would be Javonte Williams and the Denver Broncos running backs against Cleveland. Those are all the matchups that I really care about in terms of upgrades. Some downgrades at the position, though, would be most notably James Conner, who gets the Vikings. They've been the worst run defense over the last 5 games. Then Amir Abdullah, perhaps Alexander Madison of the Raiders will get the Chiefs. And then DeAndre Swift against Detroit gets a really rough time with Roschon vulturing him. I'm not quite sure how much you trust Swift this week. But then Derrick Henry, who you're always starting, gets the Eagles, so not that relevant in all honesty. And then this next one I do kind of worry about. The Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren backfield get the Bengals a very difficult bottom 5 matchup for them. So I think they're tricky starts this week. I think Jonathan Taylor is a little bit difficult to trust. The next most difficult matchup would be the Patriots. They're right behind the Bengals. Then it's the Ravens against Saquon Barkley. You're obviously starting Saquon. And then Miami against Josh Jacobs. I think you're starting Josh Jacobs. So it's mainly James Conner and the Steelers running backs that get a massive downgrade. DeAndre Swift and Amir Abdullah also a bit questionable this week. So those are all the matchups. And now here are the running back rankings for me this week. I think the difference makers at the position are obviously Saquon Barkley and Jahmyr Gibbs. I think if you have those 2, there's no way you're benching them. Saquon, I think, is the actual MVP this season. I think if you have him, you're probably the favorite in your league to win the championship. That's most likely the player you need this season to win it all. But Jahmyr Gibbs, I think, will dominate because Dave Montgomery is actually questionable with a shoulder injury. He did exit last week, so he may or may not play. It's Thursday, and even if he does, I do think they lean on Gibbs a little bit more. They got embarrassed last season against the Packers on Thanksgiving. I don't think it happens again. So the Chicago Bears are not the worst defense against the run, and I do think Gibbs will go off this week. I think him and Saquon are the top 2 plays, but then we'll enter another tier where you're obviously starting these players as well. Bijan Robinson, Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, Devon Achane, and Derrick Henry. I think if you benched any of these players, you'd be a fool, and it's just kind of the nuances of who to put over the other one. But Bijan has been elite the last month. Before the bye, he was dominating, and I think after it, they'll continue to lean on him like crazy. Jacobs scored 3 touchdowns last week. He's been on a heater. They have definitely leaned into his skill set since the bye week a little bit less in favor of Jordan Love. So Jacobs is elite. Mixon gets an elite matchup. And aside from last week, he was excellent. So I think he gets back on track. The Jags can't stop anyone on the ground. Achane scored 2 touchdowns in the passing game last week, and he's been excellent as well. Derrick Henry was amazing against the Chargers, but Justice Hill did vulture the house call touchdown. So against the Eagles, it's a bottom 3 matchup, and in this top 7, he does have the worst matchup you can find of this group. So I do think Derrick Henry's at the bottom, but at number 7, you're obviously starting him, and everyone above him. I also think the players in the next tier are also all in your lineup. I think 8 through 17, I think are definitely players you're starting. I got Chase Brown, followed by Alvin Kamara, and both of them are going to see a ton of volume. In the passing game, their workload is unquestioned. There's no backup behind them at all. So they're both top 10. Then James Cook has been a stud this season, definitely a must start every week, followed by Kenneth Walker, Breece Hall. I feel like they're really talented, but their offensive schemes have kind of impacted their fantasy upside. The touchdown doesn't always hit for them, but the workload's usually close to 20 touches, and they also usually catch like 5-6 catches as well. So I definitely trust them. They're top 12. And then I think there's a slight tier break, but I still think no matter what, you're starting these next players. Chuba Hubbard has been fantastic this season, and we didn't see anything from Jonathan Brooks, so his role isn't changing at all. Isiah Pacheco coming off IR. Maybe he doesn't get like 25 touches. Maybe Kareem Hunt does get involved, but against the Raiders on Friday, I definitely would start him. He was already full in practice. He has missed since week 3, been on IR. With a leg injury. So expect Pacheco to play, and if he does, he's top 15, definitely starting him. Kyren Williams, also a player starting, but has been underperforming lately. The touchdowns have evaded him a little bit, and last week he had no catches. That was concerning. So a bit of a downgrade, but still going to start him at number 15. I think you have to. Followed by Jonathan Taylor, who gets a tough matchup, and with Anthony Richardson, a little less work in the passing game especially. And then Dave Montgomery, if I knew for sure he was healthy, I'd probably rank above Chuba Hubbard. I think I'd put him back in the top 13. I think you'd 100% be starting Montgomery. Even at the moment, I think he's a top 17 play. Definitely a player you're starting. It's just a question of will he actually suit up with his shoulder injury. So those are all of the must starts. I would project like 15 plus points for all of them. And then I think we enter the flex plays or high-end RB2s, honestly. I think there's some really good production, should be over 10 12 points this week from these guys. I think Bucky Irving was so elite last week in the passing game, definitely overtook Rachaad White. I was very wrong about Rachaad. Everything I thought would go to Rachaad went to Bucky. And although Rachaad did score a touchdown, Bucky Irving was by far the better play. My top 6 ranking on Rachaad would have looked great if it went to Bucky, but in hindsight, it looked pretty bad. Rachaad was relegated. So I have Bucky Irving only at number 18 because the workload was actually evenly split with Rachaad in the run game. It was all of the targets that went to him. So I'd like to see it one more time before I fully elevate him into the top 15, but Bucky Irving definitely looked good. And then Aaron Jones got back in the end zone. He also fumbled, but looked really good last week, and it looks like Cam Akers is officially behind him. No more concerns for Cam Akers. But then there's Christian McCaffrey, who in this Brandon Allen offense with no Brock Purdy, I'm very concerned about the upside. Against the Bills, only RB20, not the best play possible. I would understand benching McCaffrey, but odds are he's going to be in your lineup. I think he's more of a flex play, though, this week moving forward with no Brock Purdy. But then we have James Conner, who I mentioned gets the worst matchup in the NFL, and last week was so strange. Really weird touch split between him, Trey Benson, and Amari DiMercado. So I don't know what happened. The rain was a good spot to run the ball, and they just didn't really do it. So James Conner, concerning. I hate this matchup. I think he'll bounce back. I don't worry about him too much long term, but last week was a red flag, and the matchup's also very much red flag. So I think you have to start him on name value, but he's just a flex play this week. And then DeAndre Swift also gets a really difficult matchup against Detroit. So the volume has been there, but Roschon has also vultured him. I'm kind of concerned I'm ranking him too high. I kind of want to rank Rachaad White above both Connor and Swift, honestly. I think there is some more upside for Rachaad and a safe floor, but there will be more volume for guys like Connor and Swift. So Rachaad, I think, is also in the flex conversation. Not that big of a teardrop from Bucky Irving, but maybe after another game, maybe it'll be a massive tier break between the two. But then I got Rico Dowdle, who gets an elite matchup. I might consider Rico Dowdle a much better play than this later in the week. I'm going to look into it a little bit more tomorrow. I might be upgrading Rico Dowdle. But at the moment, it's a weird offense. He fumbled last week. The touchdowns are scarce. Against the Giants, though, he does deserve an upgrade. I think Rico Dowdle's a legit flex play this week. Then I have Tony Pollard, who probably doesn't see the same workload with Tyjae Spears coming off the concussion. Spears missed last week. That was a big reason why Pollard was a good start. But he looked really good. The Titans' offense has improved a lot lately. But then lastly, I think Nick Chubb is the last guy I'm interested in starting. His touchdown role is very much on lock. I don't worry about Jerome Ford at all on the goal line. So Nick Chubb, an interesting start himself. And then we move on to the players I think I'm benching, mainly due to matchup. But some of them I just don't trust at all. I got Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren outside of my start bubble at 27-28. I don't like their committee. I don't feel too confident in knowing exactly which one will score a touchdown. Last week it was Warren, but it could easily pivot to Najee getting those goal line touches. And their volume has been close to 50-50 lately, so I do view them very comparably. And against the Bengals, it's a very tough matchup. So I'm not expecting a ton of efficient work for them. I do worry about it. I don't think they're the safest plays. The matchup does concern me the most. So I think I'm going to bench both of them. I also think I'm going to bench Rhamondre Stevenson, given he was really not that much used last week. He was bad against the Dolphins. Antonio Gibson looked much better. So I still think he's the guy, but I don't trust him. Even against the Colts, I'm not that excited. The matchup's not bad, though. It actually does rank top 3. So maybe I'm too low, but I think I'm going to pass. Most likely, I think you have to be a little desperate to go with Rhamondre. And then Travis Etienne, if Tank Bigsby comes back, I have no idea what to expect. So I think I'm going to bench him as well. If he does get the start, even then, I'm not quite sure what I'm getting. But then there's Tyrone Tracy, who did get vultured by Devon Singletary against the Cowboys with that weird situation at quarterback. I don't trust the offense at all. So I think I'm going to bench Tyrone Tracy. And then these next 3, I definitely would probably start if I knew they were healthy. But based on the current injury report on Tuesday, I really have no idea if they'll play. J.K. Dobbins left last week around halftime. With a knee injury, I really doubt he suits up against the Falcons. So I think I'd bench him for now. We'll get more clarity with some injury reports. But Brian Robinson is dealing with an ankle injury, and he left last week. He came back, and then he re-aggravated it. I don't think he plays this week. So not expecting him to suit up. And then Austin Eckler is dealing with a concussion. It might be Jeremy McNichols and Chris Rodriguez again in this backfield. So that's very concerning. Eckler's probably less likely to play, but it is a Sunday game. There's a chance he does practice and is okay. Robinson, for now, I have no idea if he'll suit up, given he left the game twice last week. So that's concerning. Those 3 are very appealing, but given their injury status, I think I'd bench. Amir Abdullah played very well last week with some pass catching work, not so much on the ground. And with a terrible matchup against the Chiefs, I think I'd rather just bench him and avoid the Raiders' backfield this week. But Gus Edwards, if he was to get the start, if J.K. Dobbins doesn't play, then he'll get decent volume, but with no pass catching work, his upside super capped, so not expecting much. I think I'd bench Gus Edwards for sure. And then Kareem Hunt, interesting behind Pacheco, but if Pacheco's healthy, I'm going to bench Kareem Hunt. No thank you. Roschon, just looking for some vulture potential. That touchdown's really interesting. It has hit a decent amount, but how often will it repeat? I think I'm going to pass on Roschon against Detroit. Bad matchup, for sure. Lastly, I think Tank Bigsby has the last relevant flex consideration, but I think I'd bench him. He is not a guarantee to play. He did exit early the last time we saw him a few weeks ago before the bye. So that's the cutoff point. I think starting with Javonte Williams at RB40, even though he's technically a starting running back, I have no idea what to expect. So I'm benching him. Maybe Jeremy McNichols is an interesting add off the waiver wire today, given the Commanders' running back injuries. But at the moment, I can't quite rank him high enough to start. But Ray Davis, another backup Same with Mostert, Justice Hill, Tyjae, Tyler Algier, Jerome Ford, Emmanuel Wilson, Braylon Allen, Zach Charbonnet, Cam Akers, Trey Benson, Antonio Gibson, Audric Estime, and Jaleel McLaughlin. I think they're all worth rostering, but I would not be starting them. Just some backups with potential vulture appeal. So those are my running back rankings, and I think you're starting the top 17 with a lot of confidence. Those I think are the safest plays overall, and then after that point, it's just kind of dependent on what your depth is and what you can tolerate in terms of risk. But I think Bucky Irving through Nick Chubb all offer a very decent floor. I think they will go over 10 points, and I think there's also some legit upside given their recent success. Like Nick Chubb scored 2 touchdowns last week. It could happen again, and everyone above him has usually been overperforming Nick Chubb's average. So I do trust the top 26 this week. I think those are the starters. Starting with Najee at 27, I think I'd start to bench those options. So these top 41 on the screen all the way through Jeremy McNichols, I think are the most relevant this week. And that's going to wrap up this video. I will be posting wide receivers very soon, and stay tuned for that. If you don't want to miss out, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you get updated on all of my new content as soon as it's available. But if you haven't noticed, my voice was a bit lacking. I did lose it a little bit at that Chargers game, watching Quentin Johnston drop away that game. So that was a bummer. Hope the audio is not a problem. My voice should come back by the end of the week. But that's going to be it for me. I hope you enjoyed. My name's Adam Rancho. Thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.